Welcome to Channel AMEC, your insight to the Australian visa system. Good day everyone, my name is Carl Young, your online YouTube visa consultant. Are you interested in migrating to Australia? Why don't you consider to subscribe to my channel and turn on the bell on the side, so once we have all the updates and news, you'll be the first one getting all the insight. Now today's video, I would like to perhaps through my little bit of research and survey and what my profession has been in this phenomenon and area for the last 20 years, I would like to share a little bit of what I think, why it is happening like this. Now, supposedly, we have just been through a century pandemic, well, a couple of years back. All the economy is supposed to seek to revive, and all the economy after the pandemic by ways of boosting all types of areas of all type of industries to boost up the all the sales markets and things, including immigration. So what had happened is after the pandemic, all the countries, for example, Canada was called out to have millions of migrants to come in just to boost the economy, and so was Australia. It increased the annual quota to almost up to 200,000, I recall back then. So it was all looking good. However, 2024, it doesn't seem good anymore, and I would like to take this opportunity to answer the reason why I believe that is actually happening, how all the developed English-speaking Western country is actually crashing down on migrants numbers per quota. So let's have a look at some of the background instead of going back to pandemic, but perhaps we go a little further to where there has been the tensions between US and China. Obviously, you see this photograph. It's taken at the back of the Biden and Xi Jinping. However, the actual trade war started with Trump and Xi Jinping back then. I think I recall back it's still 2018. Now, you may ask, how would this actually be causing the issues? We need to understand how the background actually moves. Now, we all know that China has been a world manufacturing superpower for the last 20-30 years. Now, obviously, with what the US's intention and all this so-called, perhaps, I don't know if it's going to be a Cold War or not, but obviously, US is pulling all the manufacturing chain out of China, which we can see that, and they wanted to reconnect all these chain back to East Asia, Southeast Asia, and all the way to India, as we have seen a lot of manufacturing setting up in Southeast Asia and throughout all into Central Asia. So that is way what has already been happening throughout the start of the trade war, pandemic, and post-pandemic. Now we need to understand one thing, that it's really not that easy to actually pull a string out, especially there's probably millions of those strings out of the world manufacturing. We have been living, and some of the generation, I mean, for example, my child's generation, they have seen almost all the products were made in China. Now we are looking into a futuristic where a made in China is no longer going to exist, and this is a major phenomenon and changes of human history as well, that we are, unfortunately or unfortunately, we are actually living in this period of time. Now, obviously, what had that caused, together with pandemic, and we can see this documentation issued by International Monetary Fund. It's basically talking about the post-COVID inflation dynamics, and it's not just due to COVID. COVID is just one of the phenomenon that makes inflation even worse, and it's a beginning of it, but it's gonna prolong. See, all the Western world is looking to pull the inflation down. So we see how the government around the world is doing. They have, you see, the U.S. Fed is trying to increase the interest rate in order to actually push or pull, whichever the way, the inflation down. However, we had just been through, we were expected back in 2023, expecting in 2024 the interest rate will be going down because the inflation has been pushed down. However, I don't think that is the case. Why? Well, we need to go back because the world superpower on manufacturing has been closed down, and the reconnection of all these manufacturing production lines is still pending. Some of it is ongoing. It's not really ready, shall I say, and that is why we have or experiencing all this inflation, and whereby the interest rate is still kept at the point where we at this point in time. That's gonna kill a lot of small medium-sized business if they have debts and have the interest required to be paid, and that also cause all the raw materials costings to go up, and that's where the inflations has been out there at this point in time. So as you can see, this is not something that could be easily resolved. Now, what had that lead us to? That had led us to this. Probably everybody will be familiar with. Okay, the housing crisis. Now, why is it a housing crisis? Well, I'm not too sure why government wouldn't put more money into building houses, but obviously the cost of building a house is going to be more expensive. Interest rate is higher, so the landlord require, if they have mortgages, they are required to put the rents up. Right? And that's where the start of course of the housing crisis. And it's not just in Australia, it's also happening all around the world. It's happening in Canada, happening in UK, and also Europe as well. So this phenomenon is out there. Don't think it will be dropped until the inflation has been, really pushed down and the interest rate has dropped. Only if the interest rate has dropped, then the landlord with mortgages, okay, then can actually drop or stop their rental increase for future. You see where that come from? Now, let's talk a little bit about politics. Now, obviously, all the politicians, they will want to win their next elections. And of course, that's their goal, because they will then hold the power and also to to govern, okay, to govern the nation. And that's what the interest for all the politicians. I think everybody will agree with that. Now, if inflation cannot be dropped and all the costs continue to rise, how will the politician actually gonna win their elections? So we have seen all around the world in the globe that a lot of politicians, leaders, they only take one term and they switch to another opposite party, and that's where, because they just could not within 3 or 4 years of time to push the inflation down towards a certain point that they get that agreed ratio from their general public. And that's happening. Now, if you are the politicians, what would you do? You probably have nowhere to go but perhaps to blame the immigrants. Well, why would they do that actually? Now, for my personal experience, just share a little bit of my stories. Grew up and living in Australia for the past almost 30 years. I've seen how the price of house used to be back in Brisbane, and now what it has become. Now, for me to actually purchase a real estate asset in Brisbane now, I couldn't do it. From what I have seen past 20-30 years, the pricings compared to what we have today, we just couldn't do it. Now imagine how many of people is having those kind of feeling, okay, and they lived through the past 30 years in Australia or perhaps in Canada, any city in the Western societies. Can you accept that kind of price? Probably not. However, for the interstate purchaser or international purchaser, that's the migrants, they wouldn't have that kind of feeling. You see what I mean? So we get a lot of, just give you an example. We got a lot of interstate purchases from Sydney and Melbourne. They sold their property. They come to Queensland. Wow, it's cheap. Considerably cheaper, of course, than what has been offered down in Sydney and Melbourne. So as all the new migrants, they're coming in, right? And then obviously, if they migrate, they need to have a home. They either buy it or they rent it. They have no choice, right? They're gonna take a tent and live in a garden or live in the outdoor. It's not just gonna happen. So that is all causing the issue, and that is where how politicians had altered their thinking to actually start doing what? Start doing cutting down the immigrant numbers happening in US. And they have stopped I don't know how many H1B visa in UK, Canada, and obviously in Australia as well. And that's how I conclude the phenomenon and the reasoning of why all this is happening. Now, many people may ask, how would this be resolved and how long would this continue? Well, obviously, we haven't really been through a similar kind of circumstances in the period of time in, I don't know, in human history. I don't think anyone has actually gone through things like this. So I believe it will at least 1.5 years, 18 months to at least 3 years of the times. We have already gone through the first quarter of 2024, and you can see, just give you an instance, the government of Australia, they have not issuing much of visa. Instead of processing all the visas that has been invited or lodged last year, they have put on pause on a lot of applications, and they are due to renew a new policy. Perhaps they're going to announce it on 1st of July or later this year. So you can see how the change amendments of law would take the timings, and that's how I estimated at least 18 months. Because once you announce it, you see the day before we have that draft, the education industry thing, that is just on draft. But once that's done, they still need to go through parliament and things and get that law passed through. That's gonna be another 6 months. So it's not gonna be easy or quick. So what can you do? Well, I think my advice is that we need to understand what's actually happening around the world and what's happening in front of us, and just get prepared. Whether prepared to, do whatever you're supposed to do. I don't know the answer to that, and I don't think there's gonna be someone just jump out of the blue to actually save all the migrants all the way. But it's pretty cruel from what we describe. But that's what's gonna happen, and why. I got that answered in this video. Anyway, should you have more question, query, more than welcome to leave comment right down below. Let's see you next video. Goodbye.